Right. Good. Good evening for me. My name is Rijk. I'm a committee member of the special interest group Energy and Renewables. I'm responsible for organizing and facilitating events. So here we are. I'm based in Dubai. So if you're wondering why it's so dark, it's because it's about 8 p.m. here. We have some speakers from the UK. So they're still in the afternoon, and we have somebody in the middle, which is Mikhailo from Kiev. So lots of different time zones. But if you're wondering why it looks dark on my side, that's because it's evening already. Okay. So today we have our first webinar of this year, and it's called New Year, New Energy. Surprise, surprise. So before we get started, I just want to, start off this meeting with a bit of a funny story. Just to get us going, right? So, New Year, Royal New Year, and a couple of pictures. So, what are we talking about here? Now, in the left, you can see, maybe familiar with the people that are religious, and especially the Christianity. This is the three kings. It's all related to the birth of Christ. And why is there a picture of that? The 6th of December is where a majority of the people celebrate that particular day, which is also called the baptism of Christ. Some people, I think mostly the Russian Orthodox or the Greek Orthodox Church, they actually celebrate that today. Okay, well, how is that related to the new year? So I'm Dutch, right? So I'm from the Netherlands, and obviously, we're in an era where it's always very important to take care of other people's feelings and considerations. And obviously, with this being the first event of the year, I would like to wish everybody New Year, but is it still appropriate considering we're already halfway through the month? So I did a little bit of research, and I saw that from my culture, apparently I didn't know that, it is still very okay to wish people Happy New Year up until the 6th of January, which is the Three Kings celebration, or they call it Epiphany as well. Now there's a loophole, which is the picture on the right side. Currently that's the Dutch royal family. The king is the one in the suit, not the dog. All right. But yeah, so the king in his New Year's speech and his New Year's meetings that he has on the 15th and the 16th of January, he still wishes people Happy New Year. So I thought by myself, I can probably still make it, till the 15th of the 16th of January. So traditionally, it would be okay to wish people Happy New Year up until the 16th of January, because the king does so, we're allowed to do that as well. So that's why the Royal New Year. Now, yeah, so where are we today? It's the 19th. The 19th, a few days later, but I'm Dutch, we're generally not that good with authority. So long story short, wishing all of you Happy New Year still. And hopefully it's going to bring us a lot of good stuff. All right, so where are we today? We got a meeting that obviously is about energy. First, before we get into the presentations that you've all been waiting for, just want to introduce you to the IRM, the Institute of Risk Management, and also want to introduce you to specifically our group, the Special Interest Group of Energy and Renewables. Then I'll hand you over to the two external speakers. They're going to present their view of the next year, the new year, so the year we just got into, and specifically the energy industry. So what can we expect for this year? So we're not going to do a lot of horizon scanning and thinking about long-term trends. We really want to talk about this year. What to expect to happen this year? Short term, forward-looking still, but short term. So we have two speakers. One is Mikhailo Ryzhkovsky. He's joining us from Kiev. He's going to give us his view on what's going to happen. And then we have Mohammed Ahmed. He's joining us from London in the UK, and he's going to provide us his view. So that'll be very interesting. After each of those meetings, each of these presentations, They will last about 15 minutes. And after that, we have about 5 minutes for Q&A. Those are really the questions that are very on topic, right? So questions about the presentation. What did you mean with this? What do you mean with that? How about this specifically? Later, the end of the meeting, we still have significant amount of time for a bit more, we'll call it off-topic type of questions. So maybe more generic questions, okay, but how do you see this in this point of view? Or just questions that are still about the energy industry and about the year to come, but haven't really been touched upon by the speakers. So we do have a bit of, a bit of time at the end for questions and answers. And then in the end, I'll leave you with a request to just fill out a survey, give some feedback about this particular webinar so we can work with that. And just, have close out, and then that's it. So let me move on. So introduction to the IRM and the special interest group. So first of all, IRM obviously is the Institute of Risk Management, UK-based institute that is considering itself the leading professional body for enterprise risk management. So they're really helping all organizations around the world build excellence in risk management, and specifically enterprise risk management. So you can see they're providing qualifications, training, they publish research and thought leadership, as well as setting professional standards. So really what the IRM does is they're just an institute, that looks at the current knowledge, the current skills and behaviors, but also tries to set, forward-looking guidance on how do risk professionals need to deal with things that are changing. IRM really is spread across the entire industry, if you like, either public, private, or not-for-profit. Now, specifically, for our group, we mostly have audience from the energy industry. So the first two are probably interesting. The not-for-profit, maybe not so much. But the IRM itself, like it says, we're independent, we're not-for-profit. So quite a balanced view you would get. All right, so part of the IRM, and that's not all of it, but it is a good part of it, is the special interest groups. Now, I've been running these type of meetings for our special interest group for a while, and I thought I could just, like many people, just reuse the slides that we've been using for the last couple of years. But that's not the case. The amount of special interest group has increased significantly. This is the latest. So you can see there is about, let me count, there's probably about 19 special interest groups. Correct me if I'm wrong, or maybe not. But you can see there's a whole diverse set of different interest groups. So, we're looking at charities. So that's the not-for-profit part, energy and renewables, which is what we are. But you can see it goes specific to industry, nuclear industry. It goes specific to subjects. So you have pandemic, you have operational risk. And then you can see, like non-executive directors, chief risk officers. So there's a lot of special interest groups that really look at, trying to provide the thought leadership in terms of, what these type of subjects, these types of sectors in the industry, would be, what it would be valuable to them, right? And then you can see all the way at the right bottom, it says regional groups. Now, I didn't want to put in another slide with all the different regional groups, but I believe there's about 17 or 18 local regional IRM groups, and they're spread all across the world. You have quite a few in Europe, Western Europe. You have quite a few here in the Middle East. There's other ones in Asia, there's ones in the Americas. And on top of that, there's about 8 regional chapters from the IOR, which is the Institute of Operational Risk, which has recently joined the IRM. So you can see there's a big body of people that have a certain passion or represent a certain, industry that provide the IRM with, and its members, obviously, with information and with insights on what to do, what's best practice, and how to absorb changes in terms of the life that we have. So all right, so that's the special interest groups that we currently have within the IRM. As mentioned before, we're looking now at the presentation of our special interest group, the one that I'm part of as well, which is energy and renewables. So We're trying to get risk professionals together and get insights from the practitioners that we have, with a strong network. And basically, try to discuss and understand what the future of the industry holds. So what will happen to the energy industry? What will happen to the renewable industry? There's several different ways that we do that, but obviously most of it is thought leadership. So we're trying to, we have monthly meetings where we discuss different types of subjects. How can we address this? Should we come up with a survey, publication, webinars? And obviously this webinar is part of that, but we really try to get the thought leadership out there in the world, and we're trying to grow our audience within the energy and renewable sector. And one of the things you can see on the left is one of the most recent publications that our good colleague Grant has provided. So it's about disruption and uncertainty and the role of risk management. So very topical subjects that we talk about, and always focus on the energy renewable sector. And yeah, so that's also why we have today's event. So the webinar really is about, like I said, we were trying to get 3 people in, had some issues in securing the 3rd speaker, unfortunately, but still we have 2 speakers which are going to provide a lot of valuable insights. But these are going to be expert presentations. And the key theme that we've set for today is really for them to provide their near-term expectations for this year, for 2023, and their trend predictions. So what can we expect within the energy industry, within the renewable industry? And just so everybody understands why that is the subject, why has that happened? If we would have asked question to people in the energy sector around this time last year and asked them how they thought the energy sector and the overall the overall, let's call it economic outlook, the overall outlook, it's not just economic but overall outlook of 2022 would look like, I'm not sure if anyone really would have guessed what has happened in the energy industry in the last year. I don't know if anybody asked those people the question. In hindsight, obviously it's not going to help anyone. But yeah, so we thought it would be a good idea to get some experts in and let them tell us what they think is going to happen in terms of the trends that they see in this year. So the first speaker, as I already mentioned, so it's our this is Mikhailo Rushkovsky. Funny part is when we got him in for the meeting, he was not a member of our group yet, but he is now. So he's not really an external speaker, but still, he's allowed to speak because that's what we do. He's got about 8 years of risk management experience in various industries. You see energy, oil and gas, and insurance, and he's worked both in private and public sectors. He is the winner of the European Risk Management Awards 2022, so that was last year, and then in the category Business Continuity Program, so that's a really great achievement. He's the founder of Runderk, to correct me if I'm actually pronouncing that correctly, but that's an online publication that shares insights for risk managers. So he already is a bit of an influencer, really. And you can see in terms of education, he's got a master and MBA in international business and is actually a PhD researcher on risk management strategies. So I think that's going to be the cue to hand over to you, Mikhailo. Please share your presentation and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Raik. Good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Just give me a few moments. I'll try to share my screen now. Okay. So I guess you may see the title page already.
Yeah, that's right.
No, perfect.
Yeah, perfect.
So basically, we can start the presentation section of our today meeting. As Raik has already mentioned, I'm a risk management practitioner and a PhD researcher at the same time. And I will change these 2 hats during my short presentation of today. And firstly, I put this PhD had, to start the presentation with the global outlook, and then we'll focus more on practical things. Because I'm convinced that the global changes that are already happening around us and in the world are shaping the new risk management. Because clearly we see that the recent 2.5 years were uh, under the spotlight of uncertainty, macroeconomic uncertainty, business cyclicity, and we expect not only ourselves but also some of the intelligence agencies expect that the next 10, 20 years will drive the competition of the global influence to its peak, even maybe higher than during the Cold War period. And this goes together with the global pandemic. We're still in the COVID thing. We have the newly emerged problem of energy shortages. We have inflation. We have growing and emerging technologies, and all these together create this blend of new challenges for businesses around the world. And in fact, the effective and efficient risk management system is the one to respond timely to these challenges and to bring the issues to the table of corporate boards. And basically now this new risk management system should change the focus a bit from the risk itself and perceive it not only as something bad that we need to avoid, but rather take the necessary amount of risk, necessary type of risk that are that will help the corporates to achieve their operative business and strategic goals. This is the world we're living now, and uh, during the conference, I always say, do not be a person who is still living in the year 2019. And to give a broader look of where we are moving to, I suggest I use the classification of McKinsey Global Institute, where when they talk about the different economic eras during the recent 100 years, and now we see that we already shifted. We started the new economic era that can be analyzed throughout the PEST analysis, just changing the economic for energy, but still the political factor. We are shifting from the globally interconnected world with the factor cost arbitrage and, let's say, global cooperation towards a multipolar world. We already see this regionalization and ideologically aligned groups that are not really willing to cooperate worldwide. They're more focused on their specific regions. And in fact, this is a great challenge, one of the greatest challenge for companies, multinationals that are working in different parts of the world, because they need to adjust their operations towards these regional peculiarities. In regarding the second factor, the energy one, the most relevant to our today topic, is again, we're moving from the fossil fuel era when we had this global access to fossil fuel resources, and now we're facing the vulnerabilities of our existing energy system, the power grids. We are channeling our investments toward the environment protection, to the low carbon energy sources, and this transition to this carbon neutral economy uh, in the nearest future will be accompanied by these geopolitical tensions between the global producers and global consumers of the energy resources. Again, we already see these tensions in place starting in the year 2021, 22, and it's still here. And the social factors, so we are moving from the concept of a small urban family towards an old population, because in fact, on one hand, we have the global population worldwide exceeding another uh, billion people on our planet, and it is mainly caused by aging of our population. And we are moving from the infectious diseases to more non-communicable diseases and inequality that is being driven by the shifts towards the aging population. And if the business is serving this social infrastructure supporting the population, indeed, it also faces absolutely new challenges that never existed before. And it goes together with the technological shift. Okay, we previously used this connected and enabled digitalization that meant just plug and play. You pick any device, you just switch it on and use it, like laptop or an iPhone or any other device you're using daily. And now all this brought us to huge amount of data available and the artificial intelligence intellect in place, and we have the bioengineering, and all these blended together create another surge of progress in the new economic era, and in turn the new risks and opportunities. I think few of you have already heard about this chat GPT. We already started discussion about this issue and this phenomena that is already in place. You can use it, and it transforms a lot of industries, like scientific industry, journalism, business, etc. It's already here, and we need to quickly adapt to it. And again, this is the global trends that have significant influence on our businesses and on the risk management itself. If we come closer to the topic of today, this is the energy. I just put together two of absolutely different factors, social and geopolitical factors that may shift the crude oil prices up or down, and the probability, let's say, is 50-50%. The first one is the strengthening of COVID-related quarantine norms in China. We remember the case of 2020 when there was like zero tolerance with all the global oil storages being filled 95, 98%. And basically at some point we appear to be in the situation when we had negative oil prices. Remember the year 2022 when we had this huge spike of energy prices throughout the year, and now we are moving down rapidly. And if the zero tolerance policy, COVID zero tolerance policy will still be in place in China, the largest consumer of energy resources worldwide, it will definitely slow down the economy and it will drive the prices down. And on other side uh, of this field is Russia, because this is the world's second largest oil exporter after Saudi Arabia. And in the end of December, Putin signed a decree that bans the supply of crude oil towards, let's call, the nations that follow the price cap on Russian seaborne crude oil. So this ban should be valid for 5 months, starting in 2 weeks, the 1st of February, and this disruption in crude oil supply will definitely have consequences for global energy supplies and may drive the price upwards. So we see these big trends we discussed in the new economic era already influencing our businesses. And when we come closer to the regional perspective, we have the largest shift in the energy sector, energy market of the European Union, because previously the uh, gas market of the EU was dominated by the Russian gas producer Gazprom, that basically was occupying around 40% of the market in the year 2021. And after the military invasion of February 2022, basically it started losing its market share. In the end of Q3, it was 9%, and it further decreasing. And very interesting issue is that today the only one gas transit system is used to supply Russian gas towards the EU. This is the Ukrainian gas transit system. So we had both Nord Streams, we had Yamal, we had other transmitting system, and in fact, the Ukrainian one is the only supplier of Russian gas to Europe. And definitely this huge demand must have been somehow covered, and we had this increase of share of Norway and the countries of North Africa who are supplying the gas through the pipelines. And we have this new trend and emerging LNG imports coming from the United States and from Qatar mainly to Europe. And we clearly see that in this year, we will have significant growth of LNG import capacity in the EU. That will be a really great tectonic change in the market. And also there is a focus on the decommissioning of coal-fired power plants and the, let's call it, greening of the nuclear energy. The recent news from the UK when the coal power plant called Redcliffe on Soar in Nottinghamshire, uh, its lifespan has been extended from the March 2023 up to September 2024. This is already example in place. And in this way, this tectonic changes and energy crisis in Europe was basically in favor to the Middle East and North Africa countries who basically are able to meet this emerging demand. And it's still here. And if we talk about demand, we must always look at the supply side. It's very nice that demand is growing, the market is growing, but we need somehow to meet this new demand. Now LNG is considered as the solution for gas shortages, and there is a huge say demand surging for LNG in Asia, in Europe, but it creates a significant challenge on the supply side because LNG supply chain itself, it consists of a few main steps. The first one is development of the natural gas resources. Then it's transportation to it's a very difficult word for me, liquefaction, sorry, liquefaction terminals, then loading it from the terminal towards the proper carrier, and basically regasification in the consuming region. And as we have already discussed in the previous slide, we have this growing capacity of regasification terminals in Europe, but the most complicated part of this value chain is the liquefaction terminals that are the most expensive and long-term piece to build in the supply chain. And again, the growing construction of the new terminals to regasify boost the demand that may overrun the supply capacities and basically drive the price up. We have the largest suppliers that are Australia, Qatar, and the United States, uh, who are basically the ones to mitigate this LNG market supply side challenge. But in turn, they will grow their geopolitical influence. Again, we're coming back to the new economic era and regionalization, because again, Australia, Qatar, and the United States, they represent absolutely different parts of the world. And if we go to another side of energy mix, our global energy mix, is the coal miners. As we had a lot of initiatives and the global energy transition away from traditional energy sources towards the renewables. And on the first glance, it may seem that this is the deadlock for the coal miners, but in fact, uh, it can be a new opportunity because this energy transition foresees the active use of mineral resources in the production of power grids, cables, electric vehicles, etc. Because the growing demand for these types of product basically boost the demand for raw materials such as copper, lithium, cobalt, manganese. And for example, the electric car, it requires much more copper than a traditional one. And if we talk about the wind power generation, onshore and offshore, they all require this significant amount of raw materials. And also supported by the UN Sustainable Development Goal, this affordable and clean energy, they even more boost this demand for disruptive materials. And at some point, it may create this so-called commodity super cycle that we have already experienced in the 20th century for different type of resources. And this super cycle will create this window of opportunity for the coal miners who may use their expertise, their knowledge, their hardware to benefit and to basically shift their operational scale towards the new raw material and minerals reality. And another point that we need to focus on is the energy security. We already discussed this point in the theoretical basis in the first slide, but this is the most practical case on the table. In the picture in the right part of the slide, you may see the result of missile attack of the Russian military on the Ukrainian thermal power plant, and this is how the machinery hall of this power plant looks like after a missile hit. So we basically 1.5 gigawatts of energy production capacity is multiplied by zero by one single missile hit. And during the period of November, December last year, Russia launched more than 2,000 missiles and drones like that. And the goal of this operation is basically to cause a countrywide blackout. And during the heating season in Europe, in Ukraine, this is close to catastrophe, and this risk must be addressed and mitigated in the most efficient way. And in Ukraine, a series of private and governmental initiatives, they basically drive the risk mitigation towards the establishment of independent infrastructure of electricity production through generators and renewable energy sources. So we have the traditional one and that is now being actively under threat, and we have an independent parallel infrastructure that supports the business, the population, and basically the overall energy security. This is one part. Another part is the financial system that is heavily reliant on the energy sources. And in the end of last year, the National Bank of Ukraine, together with the leading Ukrainian banks, they created so-called power banking infrastructure network that is absolutely autonomous from the centralized energy supply. And if there is a total blackout throughout the country, these power banking network may still provide the basic and urgent services to its clients, and basically work with total blackout, with no internet, with no light. So they have alternative energy sources and backup communication channels using the satellite internet. And if we continue the topic of decentralization, we already discussed during our special interest group the concept of small modular nuclear reactors. This is the new and emerging technology that helps to bring energy off the grid to more distant locations where there is no possibility to bring this power grid system and to bring the electricity in the traditional way, but you just install this small modular reactor and you have the energy production of few gigawatts already in place without all this previously necessary infrastructure cost and capex. And during the COP27 in November last year, Ukraine and the United States, they announced a project called Clean Fuels from SMR that will demonstrate the production of clean hydrogen and ammonia using the secure SMR with the cutting edge electrolysis technologies in Ukraine. So this is something new. And altogether, this brings us to the topic of energy security that is formed by two main factors, the cutting edge technologies and decentralization. And at some point, you may say, okay, this is the problem of Ukraine. It cannot be that much relevant to other parts of the world. It is. We have Africa where there is no diversified system of power grids. We have a growing demand for energy supplies in the Asia Pacific. There are a lot of rural areas in the world that may benefit from this type of energy security concept and this type of energy technologies. And recently read the article about on the situation in the South Africa. Actually, the blackout issue is on the table in the South Africa when they have the total amount. It's called system 6 or stage 6, when they have 6 hours blackout out of 24 hours a day. So this is again the situation, the problem of delivering the energy sources towards its final consumers. So this is the case that can be afterwards scaled throughout the world. And after we finish the presentation, I want you to answer to the simple question. You see this box where the arrow is pointing on. I want your options. What is that? I took this picture a few days ago in Kiev, in one of the central areas. So it would be interesting to discuss after the presentation. What are your thoughts about what is that? And just few of the useful links and contexts. Again, Randerk, Reich was absolutely right in pronouncing the name of the source correctly. And it's pretty easy to remember. It's risk under control, R under C, rander.com. When you may find a lot of materials relevant to the topic of our today discussion. We have the Extreme Risk podcast. I think Alexander Larson is also on the call with us today. We launched this podcast about the extreme risk management. And again, if you want to reach me out on LinkedIn, you have the direct links to my pages. And I guess this is the last slide of my today presentation. I did not see anything going on in the room. I hope everyone heard me well. So I just maybe do like that and bring back here. No, or I don't. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, yes, Ricardo, it's
That's
all good.
perfect.
All good,
Uh,
no worries.
okay, I think I'm done with the slides, and I want to hear what was the answer to the question, what was this wooden box? This is my first question, as we have the Q&A now. So, Raik, what is that? You're the first one to go.
I was busy with the participants in the room, so you're
Okay.
gonna have to ask
So,
somebody else. Sorry, man.
okay, I'll just bring it back to the screen.
If you look at the chat, a couple of people are
Uh-huh.
guessing that it's a generator.
Let me see. I'll stop sharing. Here is the chat. Yes, you are right. The guys who told us this is a small generator, around 5 kilowatts, and it's sufficient to provide electricity towards a small coffee shop, when during any type of blackout or a missile hit or whatever, you can go and drink some good cappuccino or americano or whatever coffee drink you like. And I really love this wooden box for this generator because, okay, we're in the winter, although it's +9 today, but sometimes it's snowing, it's raining, and you have this fancy protection of this generator. This is my favorite picture of the generator as for now. Okay.
Thanks, Mikhailo. I'm just seeing, I don't think there's any additional questions yet. So in inviting the audience to ask questions through either the chat, or if you're okay with speaking up, you can speak up as well.
So do we have the Q&A now, or we put it?
We're in the middle of it, yes. Just a short one. And like I said, when we get to the end of the meeting, we'll have a more extended Q&A where maybe people can ask maybe some more off what it goes to more off-topic type of questions as well. All right, I don't see any questions. That's okay. We'll leave that for now. Mikhailo, thanks a lot. Oh wait, hold on. It's always like this when you decide to move on, then actually things start happening. Yeah, so somebody, Dylan actually, or committee member, great. He's asking, you mentioned the emergence of SMRs. What are your thoughts about nuclear in general?
I guess the Dylan's question is related to whether it's good or bad. There is no, let's say, correct answer, because I'm living in Kiev. It's 70 kilometers from Chernobyl, and when I was born, it was the year of the Chernobyl nuclear disaster. So yeah, this issue is super relevant, and the safety is on the top. But if we, let's say, compare the cost and benefit of the nuclear energy and the existing technology, I guess before we reach this significant and sufficient amount of renewable energy and renewable capacities that can cover our demand, nuclear is the one for the transition. And we clearly see that if we follow this carbon neutral concept, nuclear energy is carbon zero, CO2 zero emission way of energy generation. So if answering to your question, I guess for the short term, nuclear and nuclear energy and SMRs are the solution. Later on, we'll see how it will go on, but my point of view is like that. So if we follow the new technology, and this is, let's call it safe nuclear energy, this will help us to move forward. And the month without honor. I see also another question. Well, we can definitely say that I make some calculations. If we put sufficient amount of solar panels in, let's say, Sahara Desert, it is sufficient to cover the energy needs of European continent. If we have this amount of solar light, if we have this sufficient amount of wind turbines throughout the world, also taking into account the fluctuations of energy generation from the renewables. So basically we have the energy storage system in place that are able to cover these fluctuations where there is no wind, where it's nighttime, there is no solar generation. This is the possible solution. My expectation is that in the world of future, renewables will not cover 100%. of total energy mix. Uh, Again, my rough estimation, it's around 50, 60, 70%. The other share should be covered by nuclear. And recently, it has been already, I guess, 3 weeks already since the fusion technology was announced by the American scientists, when they are able to generate enormous amount of energy out of how it's called. I'm not that good in terminology in English. Uh, Basically, they used in atomic and physical processes to generate twice as much energy from this process. If we say invest one energy unit to basically run the process and to say, disassemble the atom, and we get 2 energy units out of this process and out of this reaction. So this is another emerging technology. If you can bring it to the commercial room and put it in the commercial field, this will give you a great amount of energy supply that is also zero carbon emission. So my expectation, again, if answering to your question, let's say 60 to 70% renewables, that means solar and wind, and another 20-25 of nuclear, and we are left with 5-10%. This is like biomass and the coal thermal generation, because the coal thermal generation is still at least at the moment with the current technologies, the most flexible type of energy generation. So basically, you turn on the coal turbine. It takes, let's say, a few hours, and you get this efficient amount of energy. So they are very flexible in this regard. So we keep this level of flexibility. But the higher the base we have, the lower we need this coal thermal generation.
All right, thanks, Mikhailo. Any other questions? I will push them out for this session at the end, because obviously we need to go to our next speaker. I don't want to keep him waiting. Thanks for that, Mikhailo. It was an excellent presentation. Really gave us a 360 view of your thoughts, what you think was going to happen in this year. Much appreciate your input there. All right, so our next speaker is Mohammed Ahmed. As I said before, he's based in the UK. Currently strategy and external affairs team manager at Elexon. They're actually responsible for analyzing government policy, regulation, and market changes. This is something that you'll actually see appearing again in his CV. So that's probably his strength. We're currently advising the executive on risk and opportunities from these type of developments. So it's great that we have that link between policy, regulation, and risks. And I'm sure Mohammed will explain a little bit more about that and his thoughts on this year. So he's worked for the OGA, the Oil and Gas Authority in the UK, as a senior policy advisor. He's worked with Ofgem on wholesale energy market monitoring, remit investigations, gas transmission price control, and security of supply. And then last but not least, obviously, he's actually done a master's in London with the dissertation specifically on oil prices and energy governance. So it really sounds like he's got a lot of interesting things to tell us. Great. Mohammed, I think we're ready for you. I will stop sharing my screen and I will leave the screen and the floor to you.
Great. So I'll just share my screen. Can everyone see this now?
Not yet. Yes. All right. Just go in presentation mode. Perfect.
Cool. Cool. Yeah. So thanks for, first of all, inviting me to speak at the IRM. It's great to obviously listen to Mikhailo's presentation. I think my presentation more focused on the UK and the UK energy market, and obviously give a bit of background onto Elexon and what we do. Essentially, we're only UK based. We're a market operator, and I'll go into that in a bit more detail later on. So in the presentation, I'm going to go into the intro to Elexon, headlines, again, very UK based, and then looking back and then looking forward as well. So that's a broad outline of my presentation. So in terms of what Elexon do, I mean, just before stepping back a bit, just to explain the UK market, it's essentially, we are a market operator. So you can say we are like industry self-governance for the electricity market. We sit under the system operator, but we're independent of them. There's one system operator in the UK, but we basically settle the contract between the generator and the supplier. So to explain it, a bit more plainly, essentially, if a generator and a supplier have a contract to sell and buy electricity, it's normally at the day ahead stage, or even within the same day. So what happens is they do their trades, electricity gets generated, and then we take meter readings from throughout the country, from transmission meters, and then also commercial, industrial, and also household meters, and basically determine how much electricity was actually generated at that moment, and then subtract that from the contract, which was, let's just say it was 5 megawatts in the contract, and if 4 megawatts were generated, then the difference will get paid to the appropriate party. So we're basically the settlement body in the electricity market. In terms of what we do, so as I said, this settlement function is covered by the Balancing and Settlement Code, which we're the manager of. And essentially, the aim is to facilitate the effective operation of the electricity market. Also, we're responsible for managing and delivering the end-to-end services of this operation, set out on the BSc, and all the IT systems and the software associated with those. We're actually a not-for-profit company, so we're purely funded by suppliers and generators, and suppliers and generators basically pay a fee. And that's how we essentially exist, so not for profit, just to serve the industry and this particular function of industry self-governance and settlement. As I said, yeah, arm's length subsidiary of the National Grid System Operator as well. So yeah, in the presentation, I'm mainly going to talk about the UK electricity market and energy markets, and obviously any questions after that we can go into more detail. But yeah, this is a broad overview of Elexon, what we do. Code management, system operation, performance assurance, determining the meter readings are correct, and all those kinds of things. Policy support, working with government on market design, on electricity market arrangements. And obviously, this is on the right side. You see we serve around 520 market participants. We see 150 suppliers, 150 generators roughly, but also some traders and distribution companies as well. So that's some broad snapshot. In terms of the headlines in the UK, I know there's a very volatile time for energy markets. I think Mikhailo mentioned in his presentation too. Prices have been historically very high. Government support, there's a lot of subsidization in the industry for customers because of these high prices. Energy suppliers are struggling with low or zero or negative margins. And then the government support schemes are sort of increasing. There's this sort of thinking around how they should look like in the future. Currently, the entire population is being subsidized to an extent, but from April onwards, it will be more targeted. As the energy prices hopefully stabilize in the future. And these are just some headlines in the UK, of what's been happening. So energy price guarantee, the scheme to essentially subsidize the energy customers in the UK. Actually, Elexon is administering that scheme to pay the suppliers so they can reduce customers' energy bills essentially. So that's broad a view of the headlines. In terms of electricity prices specifically in the UK, I mean, just to give you a broad outline. So electricity prices in the UK are greater than most other European countries, and almost twice as much as the sort of EU average of 30.81 cent per kilowatt hour. And in August 2022, the prices in the UK were actually the highest in Europe. And it's been well known in the media and discussed that electricity costs in the UK have been consistently higher than the EU, average since 2015. So it's not just related to this crisis, it's actually a broad historical problem. And obviously the prices have surged in recent years, like increasing by 131% between 2021 and 2022, August 2021 and August 2022. And there's only 3 other countries actually in Europe which have seen faster increases: Italy, Netherlands, and Estonia. And there's a couple of reasons for this in terms of the UK context. And one of the reasons is obviously our exposure to wholesale market prices. We have high operating costs for suppliers due to sort of high level obligations on the suppliers to such as green energy levies, other policy considerations, hedging requirements, but also low margins and reserves at the supplier level. The other thing is the UK market is actually much more privatized, and it's much more of a market, energy market, and there's less state involvement and state intervention than other European markets. So obviously there's pros and cons of that, but recently we've seen that that's proved to be expose the UK to volatile wholesale energy prices. Yep, and that's sort of one of the reasons for high energy prices in the UK. Yeah, so that's a broad overview. In terms of looking ahead, in terms of the new, we had changes in government in the past few months, but in the latest sort of new government that we had, Grant Shapps is our new energy secretary, or secretary in the Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy Department. But obviously, he also covers the energy sort of portfolio. And there are some particular things happening in the UK sort of policy development, electricity market design area that basically warrant some reflection and looking into. The first thing, the main thing, is the energy security bill. So obviously, after the invasion of Ukraine and the problem in the gas market, the UK brought forward an energy security bill, which is currently going through Parliament, to essentially focus on energy security, nuclear build out, even extension of oil and gas licenses and new oil and gas licenses, and then other sort of, aspects of electricity as well. So it covers a broad range of things, but loads of sort of things related to the electricity market. So one of them is the future system operator. So essentially, we have a national grid ESO. The idea is they will move to a publicly owned future system operator. So the system could be operated independently, and essentially be a nationalized operator, and not have bias, from the investor's perspective, and operate the system efficiently. Yeah, and then obviously, hopefully with the new government, the hope is that there will be some stability in energy policy, and obviously the increasing focus on net zero too at the moment. So yeah, and yeah, so that's a broad overview of new minister, new legislation. In terms of the most significant changes that are likely to progress in 2023. So I mentioned the future system operator. So essentially, the future system operator will look at the system as a whole, integrating existing networks with emerging technologies such as hydrogen. Will be a new public body founded on existing capabilities under the electricity system operator and national grid gas. So for those of you that don't know, currently we have one electricity system operator and a gas system operator. And obviously these companies, and also they also own the electricity and gas networks. And obviously these companies are funded by price controls in the UK. The idea is for the system operator function of those companies, for both gas, for electricity and the gas planning aspect, the gas network planning aspect, to move to a future system operator, public body, again, for energy security and all those kinds of things. So that's going to be quite an important piece of legislation moving forward. Yeah, and then the other thing to sort of consider is the review of electricity market arrangements. So, I mean, going back in the late 2000s, in the late 90s, 1999, early 2000s, essentially the UK's energy markets were were denationalized, or denationalization was happening from the early 90s, but properly a market was created in early 2000. And then there was another reform, electricity market reform, to sort of further open up the market to more suppliers in 2015. And now this is sort of the third reform, electricity market reform, being considered in light of all the things on decarbonization, net zero, and also security of supply, affordability, you know, the energy trilemma, as I say. So that's seeking to address those issues essentially. And this consultation, or this review by the government, is essentially seeking a view on a wide range of options to address these combined challenges, boost energy security, and move the UK to a cleaner energy system. You know, some of you may be aware, but there's basically debates on things like electricity market design, and then on locational pricing, splitting the renewables and the fossil fuel based electricity markets, so that the renewables prices remain low and the fossil fuel market can be used to provide baseload power when needed. So these are some of the ideas being considered at the moment. So we'll see what happens on that, and this is what was a key development, I think, in the UK at the moment. So yeah, I think that's it from my presentation. I'll stop sharing. Any questions? Okay.
Thanks a lot, Mohammed. I see a question from Grant. They say, if the national grid is being nationalized, what are some of the unintended consequences of this move? Will it undermine private investor confidence in the electricity sector?
Sorry, let me just see the question. Sorry, can you repeat the question? I couldn't see it on the...
It's on the chat, but I'll read it again. So it says,
okay,
if national grid is being nationalized, what are some of the unintended consequences?
Okay, great. Yes. So, no, I don't think so. I mean, obviously, the electricity sector and the gas sector as well, obviously, was these are monopoly sort of companies, anyways. So they were previously funded by price control. So Ofgem would set, or the energy regulator in the UK would essentially set the amount they're allowed to spend, anyways, for 5 years. Even though obviously investors invest in those businesses, and normally these companies, so National Grid, ESO, and National Grid Gas, and all these other distribution and transmission companies, investors like investing in those companies because the returns are certain. They're low, but they're certain for a long period of time. So that's how normally it would work. Now, the networks are not being nationalized, so the infrastructure, the transmission and distribution network companies are still investor owned and price control sort of funded. But what's being nationalized is the system operation, which again, the budgets were normally set by Ofgem, but the system operation, you know, actually in most countries is a public or national entity. I think in the US, all the system operators, California Independent System Operator, you know, ERCOT and other system operators are all sort of public entities, and this is also the case the case in Europe. So actually, it's moving to a model which should have been the case in the first place. So it won't. I don't think it will undermine private investor confidence in the electricity sector, because the function which is moving to the I guess you can say nationalization is not that dependent on investors. Anyways, the infrastructure, the networks are. So from my view, it won't affect it. But yeah, sorry. There's another question I've just seen.
Yeah, it just came in. Yeah, I'll read it out. So, is there really consideration of new fossil fuel investment given the net zero drive and the client or court case outcome? The rationale is also from a net zero perspective.
Yeah, so obviously I can't speak for the government. Elexon obviously is a not-for-profit company. We're only focused on electricity markets. But definitely what I can say from what we're hearing from government policy is they've increased the amount of licenses they give out in the North Sea, mainly as a concern on security of supply, net zero, is obviously a consideration, but because of the Russia-Ukraine situation, I think generally throughout Europe, amongst policymakers and the US and other countries, security supply has sort of become a more important issue, and then affordability as well. So it's really about balancing that trilemma. So this is what they're doing. Obviously, there's policies on climate compatibility checkpoints and decarbonizing oil and gas installations, which I worked on actually previously as well. So that's happening in parallel too. But obviously, yeah, you're right. That it could be seen as questionable of accelerating oil and gas investment to align with net zero at the same time. But at the same time, you can't offshore those emissions to other countries which have less emissions control on the oil and gas installation. So it's a balancing act from the government's perspective.
All right.
So yes.
Thanks, Mohammed. Let's see. Is there any other questions?
I think there's a follow-up question from Grant, I believe. That's just the tears. Oh, okay. No, it's just saying thank you. Great.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. All right. So thanks a lot, Mohammed. Really appreciate your insight. I think it's quite good to see, two different viewpoints on I would say almost the extremities of Europe, right? So UK on one side, a completely different situation than Ukraine at the moment, but obviously for obvious reasons. But in terms of how everything is set up, and it's good to see, that throughout the difference, there's always a similar theme, which is that things are never stable, right? There's always changes, whether that is, external driven, or whether it's internal driven, it's around policy, or it's about, let's go almost global type of influence. So overall, I think it's really good, to see two different views, even though they're not necessarily very different, but to have that look from different angles. So really great, and thanks for that, Mohammed. Let me just go back to sharing my screen, and then we should be able to see my presentation again. All right. So yeah, so now we get at the more extended session. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or answers to either one of the speakers. So please fire ahead in the chat, or raise your hand. Yeah, okay, so I can see Mikhailo, you actually have a question. You can unmute if you want to ask that particular question.
Yeah, thanks a lot also, Mohammed, for the presentation. We've described the perspective from Ukraine, from the UK, and I know there are a few participants from the Middle East in our call. I would much appreciate if there are some views from this part of the world, because there may be a different story to the European one. I know maybe Raik, or I don't know whether Alexander is on the call. So this is like an open question to give some comments. What's the new energy in the Middle East? What 2023 brings to the region?
I can give my view, right? So I mean, I've been in the oil and gas for a significant amount of time here in the Middle East. Currently nuclear. And I do see that the trend here this year is definitely shifting. So one thing is, it's a long term. It's not something that happens in a year, but the shift towards renewables. And obviously here in the UAE, that is happening with the nuclear power plants being built. Saudi following suit. I know Egypt is having similar ambitions, and Turkey is on the road to nuclear as well, which is often it's driven by different factors. So one of them is reliability. The other one is more about financially driven. So with the oil and specifically the gas markets being as high as they are, why spend gas on the internal market that's not necessarily as profitable as selling it to the global market? So I can see that with the, I would say the success that we start to see here in the UAE, with the positive feedback that comes from, the initiative that is taken about 12 years ago, I think. There's going to be a shift towards that, I believe, is that, they're going to be looking at different means to, to export more gas and have those, and oil and gas, obviously, and have renewables for their own consumption. So obviously with the Middle East being a solar powerhouse, they'll definitely be looking at that direction as well. I know here in the UAE, they have some significant sized solar power plants as well, and I do see that continuing. Now this year, that more than ever before, there is a public initiative even here. It's very public that we're going to drive towards net zero, and they're basically, putting it out there. This is our goal. This is what we're going to do, and we're going all in. So I think that is, that's what I see from here, from my, maybe myopic, but it's the view that I see here from the UAE. I don't know if Alex or maybe even Dylan from Qatar, that they maybe have something to add here.
Yeah, I mean, I echo what you say. I mean, Saudi Arabia are on a major drive, and I just noticed someone that was actually just mentioned what I was about to say, which is this commitment to using 50% renewables. And it's a diverse sort of range of products. I mean, we've got green hydrogen, blue hydrogen. I mean, the main difference being a 5%, difference in how renewable it is, but a green hydrogen being 100% renewable, and there's a huge drive for that. And the same with the solar, and the same with other things such as nuclear, as Reich pointed out. And it makes sense because when you think about it, oil is not going to disappear overnight. Neither is it going to disappear in the short to medium term, because there are many countries globally that are still going to need it, oil and gas. I'm thinking about the amount of people that don't have access to electricity, for example, in India, and they're going to need to get their energy from somewhere. And it makes sense, therefore, for the Middle East to focus on being more reliant on green energy, so that they can export their oil and gas and keep making the money. It just makes good sense. On top of the fact of they're becoming greener and longer term, much more sustainable. So yes, I think it's absolutely the trend, but that doesn't mean that oil production is going to go down. Just because Saudi Arabia becomes more renewable doesn't mean oil is going to sort of stop being produced, especially when you consider the fact that the population is going to keep increasing in Saudi Arabia. Part of the 2030 vision is also to increase, or naturally it will increase, the population with all the giga projects that are happening, on top of all the tourism they're hoping to attract as well, and foreign investment. So, oil will still be necessary. It's about the mix.
Yeah, if I can give a perspective from Qatar, that we've also sort of followed the trend that's in the region, which is aiming to add more renewables into the energy mix, but very much the society in Qatar still relies on hydrocarbons for its principal energy supply, and I think realistically that's going to be the case going into the future. You've got to follow the money, and the country has made massive investment into exploiting further abundant gas resources, and with very good reason. 2 generations ago, this was a desert country, and it was very undeveloped. And within the span of 2 generations, Qatar has become one of the richest nations in the world. And that's because they had cheap, abundant, reliable energy, which they could exploit themselves and which they could export to the rest of the world. So I don't think that's something they're going to turn their backs on very, very quickly. And I think also, you know, there's been a little bit of a wake-up call for the rest of the world, having seen what's happened in Europe over the last few months with the energy crisis and their response to that. I'm from South Africa. You've probably picked that up. And Mikhailo touched on our load shedding troubles that, you know, has plagued the country for over a decade. South Africa struggled to fix its energy problems, and the sort of structural systemic reasons for that. But it's very interesting that, you know, the European countries sort of encourage South Africa to move in a more renewable route, and they've, you know, aimed recently to provide funding to support that. But what's very interesting is that, you know, when Europe faced a crisis, it immediately switched back to hydrocarbons and coal. So what does that say about policy versus energy security? And there's a balance to be made there. You know, I think personally, there's been an unhealthy reliance on trying to transform our grids to renewables too quickly. Renewables come with the challenge of their own. They are unreliable. They make grid management more complex. And I think there needs to be a rethink around energy mix. And I think that's, you know, a sentiment that was shared earlier on.
All right, thanks so much, Dylan. I would also, I just got that question from you. I'll pass it on to both of the speakers, right? So what do you think are the key lessons that was learned from the, you know, the energy crisis or the energy crunch that we had last year? Is there anything, or what are you as an organization, or for you, Mikhailo, as an individual, what are the lessons learned from these type of events, and what are we actually doing, you know, to try to stop that from reoccurring again?
Well, I guess three main takeaways from the crisis, from the situation we have now. The first one is decentralization of power generation. So this is something we need to follow, and this is the future of energy, at least in Ukraine, in the region. The second one is the smart grids. So we need to let's say go away from the concept that there is a huge thermal generation, there is huge consumer, and there is like a power grid line that connects both of them. So decentralization foresees smart grids when there are consumers, there is prosumers, there is renewables, so all these combines in a diversified and decentralized system. And the third concept, the third pillar is the security. Basically, this pillar number 3, it covers the first two, because it's physical security. You need to provide the protection for your newly established decentralized energy generation, and the cyber security. This is very important when you get to smart power grids, when you get too, you rely too much on your software and sometimes on your hardware, you're getting more and more exposed to the cyber risk. If it occurs, the magnitude will be really, really significant. So I guess these are the main pillars that are to support the new energy, the how we call today webinar, the new energy. So this is about the new energy.
All right, thanks so much. What about you, Mohammed?
Yeah, so I think I'll echo both Dylan and Mikhailo's points, you know, in a different way. I mean, it's true Europe sort of has been quite heavily reliant on gas, but also there's been a significant renewables build out. And in terms of the context of electricity markets, what's happened is we've moved from, as Mikhailo said, we've moved from thermal generation to high renewable generation. And at Elexon, we administer the balancing and settlement code. And obviously this controls the balancing market. And what the balancing market is, it's essentially the system operator takes actions at the end when the market is tight and basically pays generators to produce because supply and demand are imbalanced, for example, and the markets or the suppliers and generators haven't basically procured enough electricity for the day or for the week, whatever. And what we've seen is since the increased reliance on renewables, that's increased the cost of balancing the system. So obviously, it's true that the cost of capital for renewables and the there are zero marginal cost generating units, but the inadvertent consequences of that are because of renewables deployment, that's increased the cost of balancing the grid with normally gas plants or coal plants or nuclear or other forms of generation. And obviously in the UK, for example, even Elexon, we've worked recently on modifications to essentially allow the extension of coal plants that were due to close this year and next year. So they've been granted life extensions. They're being paid to essentially be there just in case we have security of supply issues going forward. So definitely agree with the point on decentralization. Elexon's looking at demand side response and how that could be integrated into the market. National Grid has developed a demand side response, sort of a trial where they pay households to turn off at certain times. So bringing the consumer into the market to balance that renewable load. So I agree with those points, and it's really a question of market design and balancing all these things to ensure we get cheaper energy and low carbon energy at the same time.
All right. Thanks a lot for that view. So I think it just to add, personally, what I hear, the main theme is that, there's two shifts happening. One of them is from an easy market, where we think, we need to shift towards renewables, which is not necessarily always realistic in terms of timeframes. The other shift that I'm seeing is from an easy energy market towards a more resilient market. So you can see the events that happened, that it wasn't one event, it was like a number of events cascading what led to the energy crisis in Europe. And I think that, hopefully that lessons that are being learned is that we're not just looking at, becoming net zero at a certain point, but that it's also looking at resilience, because like Michailo mentioned, cybersecurity. So the more we're looking at electricity, the more we're looking at systems, the more we're looking at enhancing everything with technology, the more vulnerable these systems become if we don't, harden them properly in terms of, cyber control. So that altogether, I think we need to look at the two shifts, right? So one of them being towards a more resilient energy industry, and the other one towards a more, a shift towards renewables so that it's more sustainable. Let me see if there's any additional questions. I can see people are just sharing some opinions. All right. Anybody's got any questions? Any additional questions to ask? I can see there's a few people that are dropping off already. That's probably because we've been talking for a long time already. Okay. All right. Great questions. Great presentations. I think it's been a really wonderful view into, to what these both experts thought about, the new year, the new energy, what we're going to see. Hopefully gives us as risk managers a little bit of a broader view, what type of tools we need to apply this year, what type of systems we need to improve, and what type of things we normally don't look at, we maybe should start looking at. So I think overall that's been a really great session. Hopefully, hold on, let me just, one second, let me just, okay, so hopefully you also enjoyed that. So I'm just going to send everybody a link to a survey. This is from the IRM itself. I don't get to see it. Maybe later once you've completed it, and that's not good enough. But this is a link for a survey. Just take a couple of minutes to give your feedback on the on the webinar today and see if you have any feedback in terms of what can be improved, any feedback whatsoever. So yeah, like I said, please go ahead and click that link and give us a bit of feedback so we can improve for our next events. Then moving forward, yeah, so wanted to thank everyone for your attention today. I hope it's provided benefit. I hope it's given you a bit of a view of where we see the energy market, the energy sector is moving. I've given you here, this is the website where we have all types of information with respect to our group. Some past things we've published. I believe the recordings of this particular webinar will be available there as well. Recordings of previous webinars are available and some additional information, right? So please go ahead and visit that website as well. And then obviously some shameless promotion for our next event. So as an energy and renewables special interest group, we've actually established a quarterly risk clinic. So every quarter, the end of the quarter, basically, we have a risk clinic, and the topic is clear. It's just what do you want to know? What is interesting to you? What do you want to talk about? So the agenda usually is an opening, just like the one I did before, and then it's an open floor. So everybody, please feel free to register for this particular event. You can find the actual registration link in on the website, on the IRM website. But please feel free to register. Like I said, we don't have a fixed agenda. We actually depend on the audience to give us a direction of where we want to go. What has happened in the past is that we found that there is a significant, change or shift in direction, and we actually start looking into addressing those particular risks through either publications or additional webinars and things like that. So it gives us, a clear direction of where you, being the audience of the group, right? So the target audience of the group, of where you would like us to go. So go ahead, click. Well, actually, clicking that link on your website is not gonna on the screen is not gonna work. So you're gonna have to go to the IRM website of our the one that I showed here, and you can sign up for that particular event. So far, they've been great discussions, great input from the team as well, and it's a very open forum. So we don't really stick to any scope. So if anybody's got any energy related questions, just join us there, and that's about it. So once again, I want to thank the speakers for having for spending the time to come talk to us today, and I hope you enjoyed. And that's all. So thanks very much for your attention, and that would be the end of the webinar.